Oh, hi. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're listening from. Thank you for joining today and welcome to Celebrity Customer Experience Riffs with me, Jill Raff, where we riff on anything and everything employee experience to customer experience because I believe and I feel certain that employee experience will lead to outstanding customer experience. It has to start in the inside of your company. And from the top, your leaders have to lead by example. So part of doing that is thinking about how we communicate. Now, we're all different personality types. We all receive information differently. We all analyze and take in information. We actually communicate outward to people differently. So it's very important detail when we're talking about leadership, collaboration, being a cohesive work family is really being able to understand each other. And that means speaking to each other the way the other can hear you. So, with that, I am actually really excited today because I have someone as my guest that is going to help you in this manner because she's got all the great tips that you need to know. So, welcome, Liz Danziger. How are you
Hi,
today?
I'm great. Nice to see you.
Oh, so great to have you on. You just really help people in such an important way in leadership, in getting along, in collaborating. So I want to just give everyone a little bit of a bio to kind of give some background on you. So Elizabeth is the president of Worktalk Communications Consulting. She's the founder of that organization and is seasoned written communications expert for over 30 years of experience. She's a longstanding reputation in training people to become compelling, confident writers. I love that. Compelling and confident. That is sums it up right there. Super important. Danziger is the author of 4 books published by major publishers, including Get to the Point! Exclamation point, a text on business writing initially published by Random House. Work Talks, webinars, and coaching sessions prepare teams to write with clarity and influence amid the pressures of constant communication. She works extensively with customer service and sales teams. So, what better person to have on today than to really help us understand the ins and the outs? So, Liz, I always like to start with just giving a little background so people get to know who you are and what led you to doing what you're doing.
Well, I started out as a writer. I started out, first of all, as a very undirected college student studying philosophy and Asian studies at Pomona College in Claremont, California. And I actually started my career, believe it or not, as a palm reader. I was an amateur palm reader in college. And when I was about to graduate, I thought, wow, what am I going to do when I get out of here? And a little voice in my head said, oh, write a book. And I said,
Hmm.
oh, what about? And the little voice in my head said, palmistry. So there you go. And then I got a contract. And then it was published in 6 continents. And then it was translated in many languages and it sold 60,000 copies. And there you go. And boom, I was a writer. And then I wrote several other books and I worked as an editor. I worked as a freelance writer for all the major women's magazines, for Glamour and Self and Family Circle and Reader's Digest. And then at a certain point, I thought, I want to work with people who are doing real work. I don't really want to write another self-help article for Cosmo. That was it didn't feel significant to me. Not to diss Cosmo. Well, sort of, but whatever. Uh, and I thought, I want to work with business people because business people make the world run. And I went to the Anderson School at UCLA and did a program in executive education to learn to hone my business skills and started training corporate people in writing, and the rest is history.
That is not at all what I expected. I know you and I have spoken before, I had no idea. That was really interesting. I love learning those fun facts about
It's
people.
a very, I don't know why I'm doing that. I don't tell everyone that, but that is where I started. And I've edited everything from one-page thank you letters to 1,000-page books. And I've edited everything. And now I've trained so many different organizations in writing that it's been a really interesting ride.
That's great. So I went ahead and put up your LinkedIn profile. If anyone is already intrigued and wants to reach out to you, there's Liz's LinkedIn URL. So connect with her there. Let's move on. Um, so your skills, what you teach people, the skills that they need in communication are so important. So how are you using these skills in your experience in the workplace today to help those leaders?
Well, the first thing is that leaders need to understand that their language creates so much in their employees' minds. So I was teaching a group of managers in Alabama a couple years ago, and I teach a tool called the 3 Ps: purpose, person, and point. That first, you have to know the purpose of your communication. Then you need to know the person you're trying to communicate with in order to fulfill your purpose. And then you figure out your point. And this manager raised his hand. I really felt for the guy because he sounded so plaintive. I was going purpose, person, point, and he raises his hand. He goes, "Well, why do I have to think about the person? Can't I just deliver my point?" And I thought, here is the problem. Because
Right.
when a leader does not really analyze the person that they're writing to, they may inadvertently offend them. And another thing to mention is that leaders really need to know how to write so that they maintain their credibility. In other words, another manager turned in a writing sample to me. We get writing samples from everyone. It's like sending a blood test to the doctor. We get writing samples before our trainings. And he was instructed. He was giving feedback to someone who had not cleaned up an area of a restaurant, and he wrote, "I was very clean to you in my instructions yesterday to vacuum, to mop the floor." And of course he meant clear. "I was very clear to you in my instructions." But how much credibility did that feedback have? Any credibility when he had that typo? So it's complicated.
Yeah, a couple things come to mind. Well, first of all, for a leader to say, "Why do I have to think about the person?" It's like
Crack me up.
it's,
Crack me
it's
up.
all about the person you're communicating with, right? Like, yes, you need to get your message across, but the fact that you're not even considering that person means, why even bother communicating? Because then it's all about you, and no one wants to be involved in any sort of communication where it's all about the other person and they're not being considered. So no, that's being talked at, right? Like no one wants to be talked
That's a great
at
distinction, Joe.
to start with, but also, so that just blows me away and scary that's a leader thinking that way. But secondly, your point about even how he communicated to this person who was, a staff member, crew member on the floor, which to me is just as important as someone sitting in a corner office. I believe that we need to create leaders at every single level, and that means
100%.
giving them that respect. And if you want them to be all in and committed, then that's the way you need to treat them. But besides that, yes, he ruined his credibility by not proofreading and seeing that he wrote clean instead of clear. But also, even it's not about the typo. For me, what I hear from that, Liz, is it's almost chastising and
It's
punitive in a
tone.
way, right? Like his
Tone.
tone was just nasty. Like there's a much nicer, better way to point out someone's mistake or error to get them to say, "Oh, I want to do better next time," instead of saying, you know, "You
That's
F
why.
you and you go do it yourself," right? So,
Right,
so
right.
with that example, we can do some real role playing here. How would you have, to teach people what better way it could have been said? what would be your advice to that leader of how to have communicated that same message in a way
That the
that it could
person
be
had
heard?
not cleaned up the area
Mhm,
properly.
mhm,
I mean, to me, it's all about just observation and consequences. Observation and consequences. It's never about blame.
right.
So I would just come say, like, when I came in this morning, I saw that the floor had not been mopped. Okay. What's the consequence of that? When the floor is not mopped, we don't have a welcoming atmosphere for our customers. Please make sure you mop next time or something along those lines. But I would start with just an observation. I noticed, and you
Mhm,
can use this at home. I noticed that the dishes were not washed. I noticed that this, and the truth is, there may be a valid reason why that floor was not mopped,
mm,
which we need to allow space for the other person to have their story too. But I would start with just observation, consequences, request, and just keep it really straightforward and leave the blame out. And I talk extensively in the Worktalk trainings. We have a whole training on keeping your email short and sweet, which is all about having the right tone, but still getting your point across.
yeah, the tone is really, really important. Yeah, you touched on something that to me I think would be very important, especially when you're looking at that type of relationship, which also I think you have to consider the relationship between the two people or the person and the multiple people they're communicating with as a leader across your company is right. Like maybe something happened, like give them the benefit of the doubt and maybe ask,
Exactly. The benefit of
say,
the
I
doubt.
noticed when I came in that the floor wasn't mopped. Is there some reason that the floor wasn't mopped? Like, let's see how they respond to that first. Like, was there, did something happen? Is there a reason why? Keep it very, very open ended and very concise and with no more information. See how they respond, and then go to that next step. Yeah,
Very
really
wise.
interesting.
Yeah.
So, I hate to say it, but I kind of have to ask because we're still in the pandemic. As much as it's amazing how many places I go to, I live in Austin. I'm actually right now in Las Vegas. I came to speak yesterday to the Alaska Char, the hotel, restaurant, retailers, and cabarets association, Alaska, for their 50th anniversary convention here in Vegas. So I spoke yesterday, and I'm just struck by people now. And if you're in any of the hotels or casinos, you have to wear a mask. That is their regulation, which is great. But how many people still have their mask down or walking around like, and I live in Texas, so it just strikes me that people think we're out of the pandemic, but we still are very much in the pandemic. So I have to ask this question: what consequences do you think you're seeing um, in the organizations right now because of the struggles that we're facing with the pandemic? And especially, I bet this is really big for you because when we communicate in person, it's very different than when we communicate by email or even by Zoom, but certainly text or anything written, which so much then during this time became very reliant upon that. And without the body language, it's even more challenging. So tell us, please, how have you found the impact on that, the consequences of that, and how you've advised people to get through this time?
That's a great question. That's a great question. And I mean, for me, obviously, I used to do a lot of flying around and go to various places to do live training. And I love doing live training, but pretty much everyone has gone to online training now. So that's one thing. But what my clients have noticed is that in this situation where the physical contact is so restricted, the writing becomes much more significant. Because if you don't have that physical meeting where you're not meeting a person in person, then you may be relying primarily on email to have your relationship. And I tell people, in my 10 principles of effective email course, the first principle is choose the right medium for your
Mm,
message. And email is not
Liz,
always
oh
the right
shoot.
medium. Yes?
You're getting garbled. You're looks like your internet is kind of going in and out a little bit. Um, Try to repeat that. Looks like now it was frozen for a second, but it's not now. Can you repeat what you said because it
All
wasn't
right.
really
All right. So
comprehensible.
what I said was that email is a very cold medium and it does not build relationships. And what we have to do is make sure that our words, because when we're not meeting in person, our written words take on much more significance in other people's minds. And as you
Mm.
mentioned earlier, tone is so important. So we teach people a variety of tools that they can use to warm up their tone to make their tone more accessible. So we have a whole tone tools package that people can use to warm up their tone.
So can you give us an example of what that means? What does that look
So
like for people
so what
so
it
they
looks
can
like
learn?
is, first of all, visualize your reader. Like imagine how is it going to feel for the other person to read this, and make sure, and I talk to people a lot about what I call the you idiot rule, which is that if you reread your email and you see that you could naturally add the words you idiot to the end of the email, then this is an email whose tone you want to revisit. So we have an exercise, which is that somebody would write to somebody, we were supposed to have lunch today. I went to the restaurant and waited an hour and you didn't show up. Um, which obviously fails the you idiot rule, because the natural add on to that is you idiot. So we have an exercise where people rewrite that, just that short email. People in breakout rooms rewrite that email. And what I notice is that, and this goes to the core of a lot of what I teach, is that some people will write, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Maybe it was me, da 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 da," and they never ask, "Can we reschedule?" They just kind of get all flowery and nice and apologetic and da, 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 da.
Mm.
Other people tend to get really harsh, like, "Hey, I waited an hour and da da da." But the point is to be nice. I had in my calendar that we were supposed to meet, and I did go to the restaurant, didn't see you. Are you okay? But then you always need to move the conversation forward. Always move it forward with a call to action, which is, can we reschedule? So it's possible to have that warmer tone, but still move the action forward.
Mm. Yeah. Wow. I've caught myself I've caught myself doing that before where I catch myself before hitting send, because there are some times where I really could have written "you idiot" at the end, and it would not have
We
come
all
off well.
could.
So I have something concrete in my brain to remember to test myself on that. So thank you. That's a really good tip for everybody to implement right away, and that's the goal. I want people to learn. Um, Ideas right now that they can take and use from this conversation. And of course, if they like that and they see how it works, then they'll reach out to you for more. But it's
And
nice
can
to
I
kind of
just say
learn
one
from
other
you
thing,
right
which
now
is
during this time.
it amazes me how few people reread their emails before sending them. And I always ask people, like, what percentage of the time do you find either an outright error or something that should be written differently when you reread? And estimates
Mm.
range from 50% of the time to 100% of the time. You always find something that could be improved or that's actually wrong. And then I say, well, what percent of the time do you proofread? Well, let's not discuss that, because people are under so much time pressure, so much pressure. And so they know that 100% of the time they find something that's wrong or they should change, but yet they say, oh, this time I'm sure it's fine. And and then they shoot themselves in the foot, or worse. So the rereading, you just have to reread everything before you send it. There's no way
Mm.
around it.
Yeah, especially with autocorrect these days. Sometimes,
Don't even get me
oh my
started.
Lord, if I'm on the phone, right? Sometimes the things that come out, it's like, oh boy, how did it switch to that? I'm glad that I reread it, but I'm guilty. I am so guilty. I
We
often,
all are.
in a hurry, I don't reread it. I just send it. And especially if it's family or friends, I don't worry as much. But, even still, sometimes I wonder, and I'd like to hear how you address this, that I'm well, I guess I will probably forever be a recovering perfectionist, and I'm really trying to let go of that because I know it's detrimental. It really is detrimental for any sort of progress. No, nothing and no one is perfect. And so I've let go of that, but I still am very detail oriented. And so I find myself going back and looking at all these details. And sometimes I think, Jill, oh my gosh, it's good enough. Just send it. Like I wonder, where is that fine line between proofreading, catching the grammatical errors or some of those other things, and where is that good enough, and where is, oh, I should have changed some wording around even more. Where's that fine
That's a
line?
great point. That's a great point. So my third book was called Winning by Letting Go, published by Harcourt Brace, Winning by Letting Go. And the whole book was about that topic of how do you let go? When do you let go? And that was the whole topic of it. And although I've moved on from that in my professional life, I still retain that concept of winning by letting go, which is that at a certain point, you do have to just let go. So my rule of thumb is I proofread things once, I reread once. For a standard email, I will reread once, figure that I've got it, and send it. For a very important email, I will reread twice. But I think that if you have a
So,
tendency to be a perfectionist,
Liz, I'm sorry. Hold on one sec. I just want, you were kind of getting electronic again. So I want to make sure that I heard you and that people understand. So you said for an email, a standard email, you reread it once.
yes,
Is that correct?
yes. And for an important email, I may reread it 2 or
And
3
then what'd you say
times.
after that?
I said that's the rule. That is
Okay,
my
two or
rule,
three
is
times for an
that I
important
just
email.
reread twice, and then but more than twice is
Mm.
you're likely to have gotten most of what you need to get in
Oh,
2 rereads. Is the internet bad?
shoot. I don't know. I apologize. The reception, I don't know, maybe it's on both of our sides or maybe it's on my side. It's getting a little spotty. Can you hear me okay still, Liz?
I can hear you.
There. Okay, great. Okay, so for standard email, one time; for an important email, two or three times.
Right. Lost you for a minute.
My gosh, I know. I am so sorry. It completely went down. And there was a comment from someone that now is not showing. So, uh, again, I apologize. I'm in the hotel and it's showing that I have full internet connection. So, I truly apologize for that, of what just happened. I'm going to try and see if I can find that comment. But go ahead and continue what you were saying, Liz. So you said for one review, one email,
Well,
regular email, one time important,
at a
two or
certain
three.
point, you do have to win by letting go. And that this is another thing that I talk about in the trainings, is that if you send an email or turn in a report at 5 p.m., you should not be lying in bed at 2 a.m. still editing it in your head. It needs to be, you need to say that, the whole idea, and I'm glad you mentioned that concept of good enough. Good enough, in most cases, good enough is good enough. Now, for a proposal for a major piece of business, good enough is not good enough. Only perfect is good
Yeah,
enough
I agree.
for a proposal for a major piece
Yeah.
of business. But for an email, but you do have to, if you just reread it once, I would be a very happy person. If people would just reread once, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I agree.
So
So,
it's important.
yeah, thank you. Thank you for giving me the freedom to let go and to do that and setting those guidelines. Um, I cannot, unfortunately, post it and highlight it on um, the the live cast right now because I reconnected to StreamYard and it's not there anymore. But I want to thank Tova Sterling for joining and adding her comment. Tova is the host of Virtual Chocolate and Cheese, and she said, "I love this conversation. Something I say when hitting roadblocks with my team is saying, I don't expect perfection. I can't give. It holds everybody to a high." Um, but let's see, it looks like that's all it was. Oh, here. It holds everyone to a high but unanimous standard. Um, I think that is a great point, Tova. Thank you for contributing to the conversation. And yeah, I think it's right. You know, someone I've been interviewing people who worked with my dad back in the very early days of McDonald's. They were owner operators from the early years. And he said, you know, one thing that we always loved and respected about your dad is that he never asked us to do anything that he didn't do himself. So there was a level playing field. And when you're working side by side and you're showing that you're not looking down at anyone due to role or task or position or title, then everyone's going to be working all together for the same purpose. And if you establish that early on, then your communication also reinforces that. And I think your communication style, your tone, and your word choice, and what you do, like Tova pointed out, is letting people know, look, I'm not expecting anything more from you than I don't expect for myself as the leader. So that was a great contribution. I love it. Thank you, Tova. Um, so Liz, I apologize for the for the technical difficulties, but you've given so many great points and great tips here. I'm going to just put back on again how people can find you. LinkedIn.com/Elizabeth Danziger. It's up there. Um, so in closing, it's been a quick half hour. Um, what else would you like to add that could help people understand how to communicate better in the workplace so that not only do they have this this healthy relationships going on, but actually one that can help them grow as a business?
Always think of your reader. Always, always think of your reader. That is the key thing. And ask yourself, what does my reader care about? What questions are in my reader's mind? Think about the reader and focus on use the same type of language that your reader uses. Don't go above, don't go below.
Mm.
And that's the thing. I mean, if you know the purpose of your communication, are you informing, requesting, or persuading, and you know who your reader is, you're going to be light years ahead of everyone else. And please do reread.
Yeah, that's really important. What you just said is think about the purpose, right? It goes back to your three P's, what you mentioned in the very beginning. Um, think about what is the purpose, right? You started out with saying purpose and then person and then point. So what's the whole purpose? Is it to influence? Is it to give directions, right? All of those different many ways that we communicate. Think about, as you said, the person that you're speaking to and what's the point of your letters. Those are of your communication. So one last quick question. Um, you focus on the writing, but do you also work in communication verbally and just directly?
I do some, I actually focus primarily on the writing. I've also done some programs on nonverbal communication in the workplace. And for spoken communication, there are people who specialize just in speaking. And I tend to refer those people to a colleague. I'm a writer. I've been teaching writing for 35 years. And anything that has to do with a written word for customer service, for sales, for professional service firms, that's really my wheelhouse, is the written communication and the nonverbal to some extent.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Well, everyone knows where to find you for that because today more than ever, the written communication is stronger than ever and really, really important. So I would encourage everyone to reach out to Liz, and she runs workshops and seminars, and so reach out to see how she can help you with that. Liz, thank you so much for joining today. Really, it's always a pleasure. I enjoy just how you communicate and all your great tips. So thank you
Thank you.
for that. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And I love your
Sure.
philosophy.
Thank you. Are you there with us?
I'm here.
Um, oh, okay. It keeps getting frozen. I'm sorry. You started to say you love my philosophy, but I
I
didn't hear
do
what came
love your
after that.
philosophy. I think you really hit on a core truth that when people are treated well, they treat others well. I mean, what could be more obvious, but yet how many companies lose sight of that? And there is a direct line between how managers communicate to the customer experience, which means that's to the bottom line. So you're really onto
Mhm.
something very fundamental here, I think, and I wish you a lot of success in your work.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, my goal is, because obviously I believe that that's super important, that we will actually create a happier world, a happier place that we all live in by how we communicate, how we prioritize people in our workplace, and outside, of course, but where most of our time is spent at work or being customers either way. So we're impacted by that. So I know that you can help people with that as well. So thank you. I
Thank you.
appreciate it, Liz.
You're welcome.
So Liz, hang on for a sec here. I'm just going to wrap up for a minute. I want to thank everyone for joining today. Please excuse some of the complexities and challenges that we had with the Wi-Fi, but I think we were able to get all the goodies that Liz had to share with us today. Great nuggets on communication. It is all about communication. I have a CX checklist that I offer often, and you can get it from my website, which is up here, jillraff.com. And communication is just one of the elements. And one time I was speaking, and they had a Q&A afterwards, and they said, well, where there's 5 elements here, where would be the best place to start? And I was like, communication, communication, communication. It's all starts with that. So Liz can help you on that written part. Thank you for joining today. And next week, we will be back again at the same time, the same place. I want to thank everyone. As always, thank you, Tover, for joining and for your contribution. I encourage everyone, even if you're watching the replay, thank you for watching the replay. And connect with me to talk about how can you prioritize your people? How can you improve your employee experience in order to create that great customer experience, which ultimately is what supports and makes your business grow, right? So thanks everyone today, and I wish you the best, and I will see you again next week.